Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. It's been a brilliant week of racing, and as always, I'm here to tell you all about it. This is the two-wheel focused episode of the week, so that means it is time to talk about the MotoGP final at Valencia. Obviously, as always, before we get to the big show, we have to talk about the smaller classes, and Moto3 and Moto2 obviously both already had the title decided before this final round. So they didn't produce maybe the most intense races ever, but still a couple fun things to watch. First of all, in Moto 3, Masia was a bit disappointing. Obviously, he just won the championship last week, and then this week just lacked the pace to go with the lead pack. Eventually, the lead seven could manage to break away, while he and Munoz just were not able to keep up from among P8 and 9, and eventually got swallowed up by the field even further. Daniel Holgado once again did what he does best, which is an amazing comeback drive after getting wrecked on lap one, or like rather, he got forced very, very wide on lap one and got dropped to the back of the pack through no fault of his own, but did manage to charge back all the way to, I need to check, yeah, P8 even. Either way, like, as leader of the chase pack at the end of the race. That was like very, very stunning drive, and more or less what he's done the past couple of weeks, because the guy just can't get a clean race anymore seemingly. The Sharpen was dominated by the intact combo of Sasaki and Veijer. Why do I forget his name now? I don't know. They were leading more or less the entire race. Veijer actually most of it until he made a little error, got dumped to P4 and never managed to claw back again, and Sasaki actually managed to defend until the end against Alonso and Ortola, and finally secured his first win of the season. Still a bit of a weird one, like P2 in the championship with 0 wins is very just rare, let's put it that way. So either way, he's going to be very happy. Dennis Unchu was part of the lead pack, but also could not quite challenge the top 4 consistently, and Rueda, who was it? It was Rueda and quick note skimming Kelso. Yeah, exactly. Rueda and Kelso were also the others that eventually lost touch with the leaders. Although more so Kelso than Rueda, it looked like Rueda actually had pace, but just got held up by Kelso for too long. Okay, either way, bit disappointing from the championship winning rider. But at least a very, very good showing from the rookies in particular, which is always the good thing we want to see. Like, obviously, the series next year with Alonso and Veijer, both with experience, going to be very, very spicy, I reckon. Okay, in Moto2, we actually had a very similar sort of scenario where also already crowned world champion Acosta wasn't really all that competitive, not quite as poor as Masia in Moto3, I wouldn't say, or at least I guess you could say that for both. Like, just the bike wasn't quite there either, I felt like. But still, it's weird for Costa to be scrapping against his teammate down in like P10, 11. That was a bit of a bizarre sight. Instead, the Moto2 race was what had happened for the last 3 already, and is Aldeguer in absolute domination mode. Like, the guy just takes the lead and runs away into the distance, multiple seconds gap by like the halfway point of the race. It's truly incredible what he managed the last 4 rounds, and it makes a lot of sense. There's been a lot of MotoGP related talk about him recently, although, as we're going to get to in a moment, he apparently is not going to have a seat in that category next year, and he's going to instead stay. P2 in the championship, Tony Arbolino was very disappointing this weekend, I want to say. His not quite, yeah, his second worst result of the year, and he was really like nowhere. When you see him finish in P16, this wasn't a crash or him getting shoved wide early and then like no time to come back or anything. This was literally just a lack of pace. He stayed around P15 all race long and couldn't advance at all, which was very, yeah, as I said, just bizarre to watch from somebody who competed for the championship for, quite a while actually. Instead, we had Kane take yet another P2, his 6th one of the year. Guy also still hasn't gotten a win, but I'm sure he'll get there next year. Very, very solid drive, and then P3 was a bit more fought over, and at the end of the day, Lopez did come on top, so also showing that Aldeguer's dominance is at least also partially due to the bike, but then again, isn't it always a mixture of bike and rider? There was also a massive incident early on in the race with Guevara and who did he? Yeah, with Guevara taking out Garcia and Vietti more or less in one clean move. Very disappointing. I do especially like Vietti. I think he's got a lot of potential, and I would like to see him on a different ride next year, maybe to see what he can do. So a bit sad to see his season end prematurely. But yeah, either way, as I said with Moto3, not really an impactful round, just more one for people to wave goodbye to the season and everything. So not the most intense thing I've ever watched in my life. Okay, then we have the big one, MotoGP, Pecco versus Martin. It was a duel for the title in a way that very much reminded me of the F2 title fight that went on at the same time, where it was definitely going to be an uphill battle for P2, so in this case Martin. But then in the sprint race, everything clicked and everything went perfectly well. He took the lead from like P6 on the grid, took the lead at the end of lap 1, and never looked back. Did the classic Martin sort of sprint race thing, so that was very, very good. Whereas on the other hand, Banaya now had a bit at least he reckons he had a bit of a lack of pace, and there's been comments about it may have been tire related again, similar to what Martin had last weekend, but no real confirmation as far as I know. And at the very least, the pace drop off wasn't anywhere near even in the same ballpark as what Martin had last week. So maybe Banaya also just had an off day or some slight issues or whatever. He only finished in P5. So at least that did give Martin a half decent shot at the title. Then again, still everything would have needed to go perfectly for that to happen. And then during the GP, as you probably, I don't know why I'm explaining this, I assume you've all seen it, but I still need to give the quick recap in case you've somehow missed it or you don't really follow MotoGP but just like listening about it every now and then. We had the perfect setup for the final fight with Banaya and Martin out in front, P1 and 2 again early on in the race. Looked like we would at least get the on-track duel, even if it was going to be tricky for Martin to win. But then he just sort of fucked it himself entirely and like outbraked himself or something and ran into Banaya. Fortunately, no crash, but both got but Martin got dropped quite significantly, I believe, to like P8, 9 maybe. I think it was P8. And Banaya could hold on out in front. So at that point, the title fight was already more or less over, right? Like, what are you going to do there? Martin obviously wants to go for it at this point. You can understand the frustration and him going for some questionable moves. Obviously, you see that, like, title being taken from you. But then he was very overeager trying to correct for his own mistakes and did it again, basically, this time crashing into Marc Marquez, who, by the way, I didn't even mention that before. He actually got a podium in the sprint race, the only Honda podium of the year outside of that freak showing at Coda. And ran into Marquez, and that was a very scary crash. Got proper ragdoll moment through the air. Fortunately, looks like no big injuries or anything. But at that point, Martin was out of the race and had effectively ended the title fight there and then. And it was already like 3/4 of the race to go. At that point, it was like, okay, maybe the race might not be as interesting now. During that sort of sequence, Brad Binder and Jack Miller took over the lead from Banaya for the KTM 1-2. So at least that looked to be like, oh, maybe we get this sort of little story arc here before the end of the year if we don't get a title fight. And then KTM things happened next with Binder running wide himself and then from the lead, and then Miller crashing a few laps later also from the lead, throwing away a potential KTM 1-2. This then brought Banaya back into the lead ahead of Zarco and the then charging Di Gianantonio, which is at least the last little happy moment. Di Gianantonio fighting for back-to-back wins, can you believe it or not? Nobody would have believed this out of the summer break if you had told him, yeah, he's going to be fighting for back-to-back wins at the end of the season. He couldn't quite get it done past Banaya in the end, and he also got a post-race penalty and actually got dropped off the podium again, which is very sad, but then again, it doesn't really matter. He got to show that he's got pace and he's got the skills actually now that he's allowed to like set up the bike how he wants it to be or whatever. Obviously, it remains to be seen if that can be a consistent thing. He still had poor to mediocre showing since the setup changes, but obviously the general trajectory has been much better. Instead of being among the back markers or like deep midfielders, he's actually just been fighting with the other Ducatis as he should have been all along. So very much looking forward to Di Giannantonio's future, and that brings us to the last bit and probably the biggest news. And obviously it's been rumored and everything, but it's now confirmed. Di Giannantonio will be taking over Marini's seat at VR46. So yeah, he actually gets a second chance at MotoGP. Hopefully this time he'll hit the ground running. Obviously, if he doesn't, there are no more excuses. He now knows what he needs to make the bike work. Everybody knows that he can theoretically do it. But at the end of the day, obviously it's still competition. You need to be doing it consistently and reliably and every weekend. And obviously if he can actually deliver that remains to be seen. I am cautiously optimistic. It would be such a lovely like redemption arc if he can actually make a proper long-term career out of this now. Now obviously I feel like most of us are rooting for him now, aren't we? I think he's deserved that level of support. And yeah, I feel like that is a very, very nice and sort of lovely finish to a very hard fought season, a very good season, a very injury heavy season. We didn't have a single race with all riders on the grid. Now it's disgusting. But at the end of the day, I am very much looking forward to the next one. Yeah, what else can I really say? I think the only other thing I could be discussed now is like the merit of the sprint races now that we've seen it play out over the year. And honestly, I do get various arguments about devaluing the Grand Prix. I don't really get too much, especially because they tend to be different enough. It's not like the F1 races where it sometimes ends up being very like foreshadowing. In with the MotoGP sprints were so different from the GPs that I felt like that part was fine. And obviously they just provide more action, which I love to watch racing, in case you couldn't tell. So I am all for that. I do understand, however, the increased injury risk and just general toll that takes on the team and personnel and everything. So I do see that, like the human aspect of it. But I feel like for us fans, there's no real reason to be against them unless it's a solidarity thing to the drivers. Either way, thank you all for watching. I don't know when the next motorcycle episode will be returning. At the latest next year, obviously, when we start hitting the track again, or I suppose we can do some in between if there's any major news breaking over the winter. Otherwise, until then, take care and bye bye.